Listen closely, because these words are dangerous in the mouths of many, but in yours, they are an invitation. They call to the part of you that refuses smallness, the part that remembers a fierce line of women who survived because they would not forget. You felt it before the world named it, the subtle rearrangement of stories, the quiet smoothing of memory into acceptable lines. They taught histories of conquest and tucked the real names into footnotes. They softened the edges of your myths until your power read as quaint. You watched as histories were repackaged, as entire lives were translated into something manageable for those who sell certainty. That smoothing was not accidental. It was deliberate. It was tactical. And it was meant to keep you distracted. To understand why the West could not fully defeat India, you must first see the weapon they favored: narrative control. Empires conquered by telling new stories, renaming gods, rebranding customs, translating a living world into a marketable idea. They did not only take land, they took identity. For women, that theft cut deep. Your lineage, your songs, your remedies, the quiet apparatus of survival passed quietly from mother to daughter. These were recoded as folklore, stripped of their authority, yet India's core refused to be catalogued. Even under occupation, the spirit, woven from philosophies, rituals, disciplines, stubbornly persisted. You cannot fold centuries into a footnote and call it closure. They burned libraries and outlawed languages, but you cannot burn what has been internalized. Mothers kept maps of memory and lullabies. Elders hid strategy inside weddings and harvest rites. These transmissions were not glamorous. They lived in kitchens, on riverbanks, in the cadence of a prayer and the methodical work of hands. They taught endurance and attention, an inner craft of surviving with dignity. You can sack a palace and take its gold, but you cannot seize the songs hummed through hunger. You cannot patent the instinct to stand when everything says kneel. This is why empires stumble when they try to extinguish what India carries. They measured victory in flags and balance sheets. India measures itself in continuity. Languages kept alive. Philosophies practiced silently. Lineages intact. Continuity creates an invisible infrastructure of resilience. It trains a people to survive not only physically but mentally, to withstand coercion, to convert suffering into strategy, to turn despair into focus. That reservoir of inner strength is not a resource to be extracted. It is a cultivated field that regrows after every burn. There is another truth they preferred to ignore. India houses practices of mind and spirit that unnerve mechanistic power, disciplines that refine attention, temper emotion, and transform fear into fuel. When someone masters such practices, they become less governable by spectacle and narrative. They resist propaganda because they have trained attention to discriminate. They resist despair because they carry ritualized forms of meaning deeper than the headlines. This is not mysticism for mysticism's sake. It is refined psychology, an internal armory that makes a person ungovernable by manufactured consent. You are not meant to hear this whole, because if you hear it, you will begin to unpick the soft fabrications that keep you passive. You will begin to see how stories are used to command obedience, and how reclaiming memory can be an act of revolt. Once the scaffolding of control is visible, you cannot pretend the theater is real. Do you feel it now? That shift in your chest, like a door you didn't even know existed, has cracked open. This is the part where most turn away, because truth has a weight, and once you lift it, you can't put it down again. But you're still here, and that means you're ready to step further. You've been raised inside illusions so carefully constructed that you mistake them for reality. The West's greatest weapon was never its armies, never its machines, never its endless appetite for resources. Its weapon was belief. Control the story, and you control the mind. Control the mind, and you control the body. And if you control enough bodies, you control entire civilizations. This is how they tried to shackle India, not only by breaking its wealth, but by bending its self-image. They convinced men and women to question their own worth, to adopt a borrowed lens. They whispered, "You are lesser, you are backward, you need saving." And generations repeated it until it sounded like truth. But here's what they never understood. The mind of India, the mind of a civilization that has meditated for thousands of years on the nature of reality itself, cannot be erased by propaganda. India is not just geography, it is philosophy. It is an unbroken chain of memory that runs through temples, stories, and bloodlines. You cannot delete a memory that is carved into the DNA of a people. That is why, despite centuries of invasion and manipulation, India kept regenerating. Every time they tried to suffocate it, it inhaled deeper. And here is where the forbidden knowledge lies, the kind you were never supposed to hold in your hands. What India has endured is not just survival. It is proof of a weapon stronger than propaganda. That weapon is identity. Not the shallow identity they sell you with consumer labels and flags. I'm talking about the deep identity, the one rooted in heritage, discipline, and an awareness of your true place in the world. The West cannot defeat that because their system relies on you forgetting who you are. The moment you remember, you are free. Think about your own life. How many of your choices are truly yours? How many desires have been programmed into you? The job you chase, the things you buy, the way you measure success. And when you fail to reach those artificial markers, you think you're weak, when in reality you're trapped inside a maze designed by someone else. This is psychological warfare, and it is still happening. Every advertisement, every headline, every curated algorithm is a subtle reminder. Stay small, stay distracted, stay asleep. But here's the paradox they don't want you to see. The very act of questioning breaks the spell. You've already felt it. That moment of unease, when you realize the system doesn't serve you, that is the first crack. And once the crack spread, the facade collapses. That collapse is terrifying, but it is also liberation. And now I'm going to ask you to do something dangerous, something symbolic, something that will mark your entry into this circle of the awake. Scroll down to the comments and write these words twice. I will not kneel. Write it twice because repetition burns it deeper. It's not just a comment, it's a declaration. It tells the algorithm, and more importantly, it tells your own subconscious. You are no longer playing by their rules. You are awakening, you are remembering, and once you do, you can never go back. And you are now past the point of polite curiosity. This is where history stops being comfortable and begins to smell like blood and smoke. Corruption is not modern greed. It is an ancient architecture, a fossilized grammar of power beneath palaces and markets. Empires fall not because rulers are foolish, but because the moral scaffolding beneath them rots. India exposes that rot and offers a mirror to those who wish to see themselves honestly. There are networks that move between visible power and hidden intent. They redirect wealth, influence education, and turn institutions into mechanisms of consent. Schools teach compliance, media amplifies distraction, courts perform theater when the script requires. Woven through this web is the manufacture of assent, 1,000 small adjustments that make domination feel inevitable. India harbored something dangerous to that machinery, disciplines of attention. Practices that train focus and inner autonomy, forms of training that make a person less available for programming. The colonizers understood and began a program of appropriation. They did not merely loot temples and plunder ports, they repackaged symbols and commodified practices. Sacred chants became market soundtracks, geometries became motifs. This looks like exchange, but beneath it is extraction by disguise. Extraction hollowed purpose while keeping forms, so the form could legitimize new loyalties. Power without conscience is brittle. Systems built on erasure fear what cannot be quantified. Ethical disciplines, communal obligations, ritual accountability. When people remember ceremonies that bind them to more than consumption, incentives shift. Greed loses glamour. Pleasure is held to account. That is the true threat to a regime designed to keep appetite unending. Corruption adapted. It birthed mock traditions that sounded genuine and appointed guardians who spoke the language of legitimacy while enforcing new masters' priorities. Gatekeepers appeared, scholars, clerics, managers who translated authority into compliance. People learned to bow to authority without checking whose authority it served. That is institutional manipulation, speaking old words while routing loyalty elsewhere. The most effective warfare is internal. It works through shame, by rerouting pride into private apology, by redefining dignity so slowly people absorb their own diminishment. Women are taught to smooth edges, to privatize anger, to make grief a soliloquy rather than a summons. Isolated, resentment becomes self-blame. Anger is medicated into silence. Once rage is privatized, it cannot be organized. It cannot be ritualized into strategy. Now imagine reclaiming that fire as disciplined heat. Convert indignation into ritual, into daily practice, into a communal ethic that refuses to barter away memory. Train attention so propaganda slides off like water. This is not fantasy. It is a method seen across lineages that survived conquest by making resilience habitual. Tonight, carry a quiet promise. Tend the coal of your anger with discipline. Study practices not as curiosities, but as technologies of the mind. Gather with those who keep promises. Build small rituals that make integrity visible. The path is slow and lonely at first, but it accumulates force. That is how, and now we arrive at the edge, the place where most will turn back. Because this is not just history, not just philosophy. This is the forbidden threshold. Once you cross it, your life will never be the same. You will no longer see yourself as a product of a system, but as the architect of your own power. That's what they fear most. Not rebellion in the streets, not armies rising, but one man, one woman, quietly becoming sovereign over their own mind. Because a single free mind threatens every system built on control. Understand this. Corruption is not just in governments, in palaces, in parliaments. It has been seeded inside you, through shame, through distraction, through an endless circus of consumption. You were trained to be predictable, to rise with the alarm, chase money, feed appetites, collapse into exhaustion, and call that a life. But India's untold story whispers something different. You are not a machine. You are not a pawn. You are consciousness wrapped in flesh. And when you remember that, no empire can chain you. The West could never fully defeat India because India understood cycles. Empires rise, empires rot, empires fall. What endures is discipline, memory, and the refusal to kneel. That refusal is not loud. It is not always public. Sometimes it's in the silence of meditation before dawn, sometimes in a ritual whispered in the kitchen, sometimes in the spine of a woman who refuses to bow to lies. That is the lesson they do not want you to internalize. Real power is not given. Real power is remembered. And now I turn to you. You've felt the weight of illusions. You've seen how stories are weapons. You've touched the fire of identity that no propaganda can erase. So what will you do? Will you walk back into the dream pretending none of this matters? Or will you carry the coal of truth inside you, tending it until it becomes an unquenchable furnace? This is not about rebellion for the sake of chaos. This is about mastery, about becoming the kind of human being who cannot be owned, cannot be pacified, cannot be broken. Do not mistake me. This path is not easy. You will lose comfort. You will lose the dull intoxication of distraction. People will call you strange, even dangerous. But remember this. Every empire that tried to erase India eventually collapsed under its own arrogance. Why? Because you cannot kill what refuses to die. You cannot erase what refuses to forget. And if you carry that truth in your blood, in your habits, in your attention, then you too become undefeatable. This is your initiation. This is your moment. You've heard the forbidden words, you've seen the hidden threads, you've felt the ancient fire. Now the question is simple. What will you do with it? Will you kneel or will you rise? The choice is yours, but remember, once chosen, it cannot be undone, because once you awaken, there is no going back.